Today's episode is brought to you by the Hippocratic Collective. Check out all our shows and content at hippocratic-collective.com. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Frances May, your host, and this week on Surgeon Interrupted, we are so happy to welcome Dr. Arghavan Salles, one of, honestly, my favorite physicians, that I've ever met online. She is a minimally invasive and bariatric surgeon, completed med school and residency in Gen Surg at Stanford, and then her fellowship in minimally invasive surgery at WashU. She stayed on as faculty there for 3 years prior to moving back to Stanford in 2019. She is kind of a Renaissance woman because in addition to her MD, she has a PhD in education from Stanford that she obtained during residency training, and her research focuses on gender equity, implicit bias, diversity, inclusion, and physician well-being. Welcome to the show, Dr. Salles.
Thank you so much. It's a delight to meet you.
So, what a trifecta, man. Just the work, of course, from your bio in terms of gender equity, implicit bias, DEI, and physician well-being. Maybe a quadfecta. Is that a word?
I don't know. They're obviously all related, and more recently, my research has specifically focused on sexual harassment. I had until very recently a grant from the NIH, I don't know what that is, but anyway, from the NIH for that. That was prematurely terminated, as have been many grants across the country.
Yep, and I'm sorry to hear that. That was an R01 grant, is that right?
Yes.
From the NIH? Well, before we even dive into, what life has been like since then, because of course that sounds like significant upheaval of your, quite literally, the work that you were doing, presumably full time. But I think that even to just back up a little bit, I was an ENT full time up until about 3 months ago. And now I'm living a totally different life. I'm in startup, I'm in consulting, I'm writing, I'm editing. But I had been following you long before then. It was really fun this spring because, of course, when I left and I quote unquote loud quit my job as a female surgeon, people were like, "You got to connect with Dr. Salles. She's an icon," and you did it. And I do believe I would categorize it as loud quitting. You did it in a bold fashion long before that was ever in vogue. It frankly is still not in vogue now. So we're part of a very interesting tiny club.
It is. It is a very small club that I think is filled with, yeah, I agree, very interesting people. I think with strong convictions, I would say. And I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting that you say quit loudly. Yeah, I don't know. I still, to be honest, like the surgeon part of my identity, I really still struggle with pretty frequently, like probably not daily, but it comes up for me a lot, in part because people ask me about it a lot. I am in a very unusual situation in that, yes, I'm not doing the clinical work that I trained to do after all those many years. And I sit in a department of medicine, not a department of surgery. So that's part of why it comes up so often, because I didn't leave academics. I didn't leave medicine altogether. I stayed kind of close by. And so it is confusing, understandably, for a lot of people. So it just comes up pretty frequently. And I have to kind of always reconcile with that part of my reality. And, when I left St. Louis in 2019, it was not actually with the intention of never operating again. And I did operate again after that. But just to be clear, that wasn't really what I intended. What I knew when I left was that I didn't want to be a surgeon the way that I was a surgeon in that practice model, in academic surgery, full-time surgery. I knew that was not going to be a fit for me and what I wanted in my life. So that I knew, but I had hoped to kind of find some way to do something part-time, better than most, right? What we invest in gaining this skill set and what we sacrifice as well to get this skill set that's very specialized and is and we can provide a service to people that very few people can. So that was kind of my thought at that time was, I don't like this model. I don't want to work this way. But maybe I can find another way to still practice surgery that will fit. And, a series of things happened. That was 2019. So then the pandemic
Right.
happened. Lots and lots of things changed. And I ended up taking some call at a local hospital for a while. I did some just acute care surgery call um, until I got my grant that we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. Okay,
And
so when were you operating
mhm.
until? Temporally then.
So that was, I may get the dates a little wrong because time is confusing, but I think it was from 2021 to 2022 that I was doing that work. And I got
Mm-hmm.
the grant in fall. I think that's right,
Mm-hmm.
because I got the grant in fall of 2022. And I just felt I couldn't continue to do all the things. It was already a lot with my regular day job to take that additional
Right.
call because they needed a lot of help. So it was one night a week plus a 24-hour shift a month on top of my full-time job. So
Oh, that is a
once I
lot.
got yeah, once I got the grant, I said, I just don't think I can continue with this piece of what I've been doing. So even at that time, I didn't necessarily feel I would never do surgery again, but it just didn't fit in my career at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the funny thing about me. I think some of you who have left have much more conviction and a little bit more courage, perhaps, and I'm a little bit like still teetering.
Oh, I no, I love that. I appreciate you sharing that because honestly, I was having a conversation with one of my friends and colleagues a few days ago, and she had quit operating in ENT, but actually just signed a locums gig
Mm,
for next month on. So, and honestly, a lot of her concerns, a lot of her motivations were very similar to yours in terms of looking for a different practice model, looking for a different way to do her job, which she loves and like loves operating. So I think she's very excited and I look forward to hearing like how that locums gig goes for her because she does think that that model where she is paid to show up 9 to 5 Monday through Friday and
hmm
it doesn't matter what insurance reimburses or doesn't, she's being
hmm
paid an hourly salary. I think that she's like very excited about this. And
hmm
of course,
hmm
that's very different from the private practice that she
Yeah.
was in as a specialty surgeon. I guess it's so interesting though, because I agree with you and like, yeah, I have conviction about it. I think that maybe what resonates, just again, having like followed you for these years, I feel like I would still categorize it as like living loudly.
hmm
Like as a person also with conviction, and I think of like some of your dance posts and things like that. Like there are current residents who are like ravers, right? Like I'm very
hmm
just like loud and proud to say I'm not going to be this really tiny vanilla person
hmm
that everyone in the department wants me to be.
hmm Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I appreciate that. I've been doing, so you're talking about my pole dancing. I've been doing pole dancing for many, many, many years, and even though I am generally very open on my various social media platforms, that was something I had not shared until I got on TikTok a few years ago, and I think it was really like if folks follow Zach Rubin, he does some hula hoop
Mm-hmm.
things, and I was like, well, that's kind of cool. He does something a little quirky. Obviously, they're not the same, but I started thinking about like, is there a way I could share that part of what I was doing and what I love to do with my time? And so I started making these videos. Still, people think they're very weird, but whatever. I like them. I mean, I love pole dance has been such an amazing thing for me. I've gained so much strength, and it's so fun to just learn new things. And there's always more to learn and more to challenge oneself with. So that's what I love about it, and I love sharing it with people. So thank
You
you for
must
bringing
be
that up.
you must be strong as hell. And I can just only imagine again, like I think the female surgeon experience, there's some stuff that's like pretty universal about that. And I can imagine, maybe some of the old guard or some older guys that I know in surgery who would maybe have something to say about it. And
hmm
to that, I would be like, I would love to see you try. I'd love to
Yeah.
see them try to do the what is like level 1? Like what's the most basic move that you could be like any male physician who takes issue with this, you're welcome to like challenge us, like go to the mat and do this level 1 move. I don't even know what that would be.
Yeah, probably something like a roundabout, maybe. It's just a little simple twirl on the ground. But it is, yeah, it's surprisingly hard. I often get comments. I love that we're talking about this. I often get comments from people saying, "Oh, I could never do this because I'm not strong enough." And I just do want to use this as a moment to plug the sport and all aerial sports. Actually, there's a lot of overlap between like pole, lyra, silks. If anybody's interested in those, it's very similar skill sets. Anyway, so for all of these, you do not start being able to flip upside down and climb and do fancy things. I could not do that either when I started. No one can. I mean, very few people. I suppose if you're
Yeah.
like, maybe if you're a swimmer, maybe if you're already a
Yeah.
weightlifter, but for most of us, you do not start out your first pole class like doing all these like flippy
Upside
things.
down.
Yeah, yeah. So you just start.
How
You just go
how
one day and
many
you start.
years did it take for you to be able to do that? Like quite literally like a flip or something like that. When you're talking about if you had average amount of strength starting out.
If you have average amount of strength, one of the first things you start working on in terms of like going upside down is called an inversion. And so it's pretty simple. It's the basic move. You have two hands on the pole and you go upside down. You start working on that pretty early on. You start with just doing crunches, two hands on the pole and tucking your legs up. And then eventually you're able to tip backward and invert. That you can do within, I mean, it's been a long time, so I don't remember how long, but within a month or two or something, you can do that. But it gets more and more advanced and complicated. And what I love about it is that like I have things I still want to try to do, but even the people I look up to who are like incredible, they still have things that they're trying to do because it is basically like the challenges are endless as you get to like different grip positions and what one hand versus two hands. And like it's just like you could spend the rest of your life trying to learn new things and never learn all of them. So if anyone has any vague interest in these types of aerial sports, I just would really recommend just go take a class. There is no expectation that you have any particular skill or strength at the beginning of an aerial class. But I realize we're a little bit afield from the point of
I
this
love that. No,
conversation.
no, this is the vibe. This is like honestly what I think is really helpful and like you're selling me. Like I rock climbed back
Mm-hmm.
before medical school. That was probably the last time that I actually could sustain my body weight. My hot yoga practice quite literally kept me sane during residency. I mean, I was probably like 3 to 5 days a week. And it
Wow,
does
good for
remind me a
you.
little bit of, yeah, the basic inversions, like for yoga, because it's the same way. Like I did love that about yoga. Like I loved that the instructor who could have been doing this for 10 years, they're pushing themselves to the next
Yeah.
level alongside us. Some of us trying to just get like the basic moves to a good workable spot. So
Yeah,
I
and
don't
I will
know.
say
I think you're
I
convincing
did
me.
yoga. Well, good. I did yoga for many many years. I did yoga for probably about 20 years before I ever started into
Hmm.
pole. And I've like done a teacher training and all of that. I actually have recorded classes from the beginning of the pandemic because I was doing free yoga classes for folks. They're on my YouTube. I don't
I
get any
remember that, I
revenue
think.
if anybody
Yeah.
wants to check it out. But so for me, and I'm not trying to anger any yoga folks because I love yoga. It's still like my first true love. But I felt like for the average class that I would go to for yoga,
Hmm.
it kind of topped out at a specific set of skills. And maybe that's because of where I live or what's available where I am.
Hmm.
Whereas I don't feel that way at all with pole. Like I got to the point where I could basically take the most advanced yoga class at any place. And yoga is not about skills and like getting better or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's not the point of yoga. It's a totally different sport, if you want to even call it that. Totally different
Yeah.
activity, different mindset. But I got to the point where I could take like the most advanced class wherever, and it would be good, but it wasn't necessarily going to always be the case that I was going to learn something new or push myself further. It depended, on
Yeah.
the instructor and the situation. Whereas I think with pole, like there's just always so much more to learn that it just does keep it. To me, it's like yoga on steroids. Like you're doing the types of
Hmm.
things you do in a very advanced yoga class, but you're doing them upside down with one hand on a pole. Like yeah. Anyway.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, um, no, I think that that's an inspiration to us all. And like truly, I just feel like every day I show up and I try to tell people a million different ways to like stay three-dimensional, or if medicine
Hmm.
did make you one-dimensional and you're a
Yep.
pancake, like fight it. Like it's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it's literally not too late for any of us, even me, and I feel old and creaky sometimes, and I'm open to this, and like I would try a class. And I think that what's been so nice about being in my 30s as opposed to being in my 20s, all that stuff that people say, like, nobody's looking at you. I believe you that, like, I can go to my first pole class and I can do some stuff that, like, maybe 10 years ago, I'd be too embarrassed to put myself out
Mm.
there or look insane. Like, I'm not gonna, well, we just accept that I'm not gonna look really athletic doing this, but it's like, no one's watching you and no one,
Well, not only that,
people
but
aren't
I'll
judging.
say pole and aerial specifically are like the most positive communities I've ever been a part of. People are so delighted just for you to show up, like there's
Yeah.
really none of that judgment that you see in some spaces, like in gyms, for example. Like that is not the point of any of the aerial stuff, and specifically for pole, just the most positive, encouraging people I've ever met.
I love that. And so not to take like a hard right turn, but I do think that in terms of career,
Hmm.
ever since the funding was pulled, like what is a day in the life now? Do you see going back into the OR as being like part of your next chapter? Like how are things going?
Yeah, that's a great question because you're finding me at a time of great uncertainty. And I'll be honest, we were referring earlier to kind of global events, but I don't like having this level of uncertainty in my career. I think most of our colleagues, when we look around, have not ever had that. They because of choices they made. It's not like a right or wrong,
Right.
but they have had a successful career in academics. In my case, that's most of the people I know are in academics,
Mm-hmm.
and have not really had a moment when they felt like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to have a job. And I have had that feeling for all of the last probably 7+ years, um, because of the choices I've made, right? Like I left a traditional pathway
Right.
because it wasn't serving me. And there's not really a clear path for someone like me. And so I'm kind of building it as I go. And if you had asked me if we were having this conversation 6 months ago, I've been like, things are great. I have this
Mm-hmm.
R01. I just submitted another R01 that, hopefully will get scored if not funded. And I'm on my way to growing my lab to be able to support my research independently. Things are good. But we're not at 6 months ago. We are at, or 8 months ago, we are at a time when my R01 was terminated. The one that I submitted in the fall will not be reviewed. The research pathway I had created here, with the support of the department, has just completely evaporated basically overnight. And there's not, you know, people say like, oh, you can just go get other sources of funding. And I really think most people don't understand. And even people like within our university don't understand that there's not like some huge pot of money out there for
Right.
at least the work that I do, but also for a lot of the work that was terminated. Um, if anyone's listening and wants to support sexual harassment research, please donate to my lab. You can get to it through our lab website, but um, there's not, there's a few small sources of funding that are available. And obviously, I will be applying. I've already applied to some, but even those are not going to be beyond a year or two, and they're not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reality that people like me are facing. And so, what does that mean? I think it means I'm going to have to do another hard pivot. And I don't know what that is going to be. Is it going to be doing surgery? Is it going to be, I'm board in obesity medicine. Is it going to be
Yep.
doing obesity medicine? I
Mm-hmm.
sit in a GI division. Is it going to be doing scopes? Is it going to be leaving academics? I don't know. Um, there's just a lot of things that are not currently in my control. Or another option is, of course, to go back and retrain. After I know the look on your face.
In what?
After,
What
I
would
don't
it?
know, palliative or like critical care or something like that. That
If I
could
could go
afford it.
back, if I could
Mm-hmm,
unwind time, I would
mm-hmm.
definitely be very open to palliative. That was like always some of the work I loved. But just like because I cannot unwind time, I don't know
Yes.
about going back for more
Oh
training
yeah.
in this
Well, I'll tell you.
timeline.
Oh, totally. I mean, I am with you. So when I left WashU in 2019, the advice I got
Yeah.
from multiple women surgeons was to go do another fellowship. And my feeling at that time, well, I mean, yeah, we could talk about that. That look, they were well intentioned. They were saying, look, this situation didn't work out for you. You're probably going to have a hard time working in this specialty because the situation didn't work out for you. So, in reality, if you want to stay in surgery, you're probably going to need to switch communities to a different community. And the way to do that is to do another fellowship. And I had gone straight through from college to medical school to residency with the PhD and then the fellowship. And I finished all that at age 36. So, my interest
Which is
when I was
amazing.
thanks. When I was like 38 and people were saying this to me, I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like I have done all the training. I have done an immense amount of training. And in fact, I am good at this thing that I have trained to
Yeah.
do. And you're telling me that because there are some pretty terrible people who I happen to cross paths with that I have to go do another fellowship, that that's the solution to this situation. It did not sit well with me. I understand they were very well intentioned and they weren't
Mhm.
necessarily
Mhm.
wrong,
Right.
to be
Right.
fair, but I didn't want to do that. And it really appealed to or kind of sensitized my sense of injustice. Like I mean, I've made mistakes. We've all made mistakes, but like I was not the reason that things did not go well at that job. It was a big mismatch between what they wanted and what I had to offer and the support they were willing to give and so on. Just wasn't a good situation. And that means that I have to bear all the burden of responsibility of doing something different. I didn't feel good about that. Um, so fast forward now, we are 6 years later, and I thought that I was making things work with this research pathway, and it's something I really care about that I'm very good at, and that's just gone. So there are somewhat limited options for. I mean, there's more options than one immediately thinks of. Like we do as physicians have a lot of skills that can be used in a lot of different arenas, and I'm totally aware of that. So it's just a question of, yeah, what happens now? And I don't know the answer. I am like actively working through these ideas of, yeah, do I go back and do another fellowship? Is there something workable here in the situation that I'm in? Do I need to
Mhm.
find a new situation to be in? I don't know.
Wow. Again, I'm so sorry that you're dealing with this, post like the big grant upheaval, and I appreciate you sharing so openly because I am positive you're not alone in like even any elements of this journey. I mean, certainly, I think so well said in terms of like when things don't work out in a department with one person, if it's like the group mind, the in club versus like an outsider, and somehow, anecdotally, it's always really brilliant women that I find that
Mm-hmm.
are like the outsider, and they're the onus is on them to sort it out or apologize or try to make it work or just find a new career. Like it is on them. Obviously, I'm very eager for the day where the tides change in that regard. It literally requires changing of the guards. That's how
Yeah,
some
but
of this community stuff.
even still, I'm not sure. There is a tendency to believe that time will pass. I don't know how many times people have told me, like, well, people retire eventually, for example. And sure, that's true. But the people in the next rung down or the next generation down are more similar to those people than you think. There's gradual change over time for sure, but it's not like I'm not optimistic that 10 years from now being in medicine is going to be like a very different experience.
Totally. And what makes me crazy is that when I had my malignant residency experience in ENT and I shared it afterwards, really like after
Mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm.
fact, just connecting with old med school deans, different like women that I knew who were in their 50s or things like that in medicine. One of my friends is a neurologist. She's late career. She's wonderful. But like when I started sharing the story with them, literally all of them said, "Oh, it was that way when I trained," and I really like assumed it was
Hmm.
much better
Hmm.
now. Like I did not think I'd hear this story modern day. And I guess it made me crazy because I was like, what has anyone done to make it so that it isn't that way anymore? And I don't see
Yeah.
a ton of instances of that. Even like House of God, I think if that was published as a narrative nonfiction memoir and not as a piece of fiction, I think that that would have helped a lot of people out. I read it. I
Hmm.
loved that book. I thought,
Hmm.
wow, what a brilliant, cool depiction of the hospital. I know this is a work of fiction. That's literally how it's marketed and like how it was
Hmm.
built. Okay, sounds good. I will say that the reason why all of my work is directed at 18 to 35-year-olds in healthcare is for the exact reason that you're talking about. Because I totally agree with you. Like the 40-year-olds now who are being primed to be the next chair who's going to take over for this nightmare group of people, they are just like their mini me's. But I actually think we have a shot. I've like leapfrogged generations.
Hmm.
I'm only talking to younger people who appear to be more with it and like it might just take the extra generation for that change to happen. But I totally agree with you. I wasted so much breath trying to like change the minds of people firmly socked within the
Hmm.
institution and the system.
Yeah, and I think part of one of the things that people sometimes overlook is that what we're seeing is a sample bias, right? If we're talking about academics, for example, we're seeing a specific type of person who has chosen to stay in that area, in that type of work environment, and has persisted in that work environment. Um, and what that means is that there's something about that work environment that suits them, right? Because the people for whom that environment does not work leave. So we do have to remember that, like, part of it is we're selecting, the system is selecting for people who like it this way.
Yep.
And one of the things that's really hard is when most people like it the way it is, they don't see what you and I and others have seen, even though they've been in the spaces at the same time. They don't see those things and they don't see them as problems. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So there was a study that came out, I think it was 2017 or 2018. Fiona Webster's the first author. They
Hmm.
interviewed more senior women surgeons to ask about kind of how they made it to that point in their career. And so you already know we're talking about a specific subset of women surgeons, right? The ones who stayed.
Mm.
And the title, or I think it was the subtitle of the paper, if I recall correctly, was The Erasure of Gender. And that's because when she interviewed these people, these women, they really denied that their gender had anything to do with their career. And that's not likely because that was the actual reality that they experienced, but it's more how they interpreted what they observed and how hard it is to stay in a system where you do notice the way that you are treated differently because of immutable
Wow.
characteristics. So, it's hard. There's a lot going on there. But I think part of it is that in order to persist in that system, you have to either justify or rationalize or ignore the very real harms that are happening to you and people who look like you. And that anyone who does notice those things and maybe tries to do anything about them is really ousted one way or another. So, again, the system selects for the type of person who fits in really well, which is usually going to be people who think everything is working mostly fine. And so that's who we see. That's who we see when we look up to mentors. And I hear a lot from people, especially women, about their disappointment in women who have let them down, more senior women who have let them down. And I just like to remind people, like, that person is not like you. If you're finding yourself in that situation where you're disappointed by their behavior, that's because you would have expected something different. But in reality, if that person was the person who behaved the way that you want them to
Hmm.
behave, they probably would not be in that position.
Yes, like, and they wouldn't be perpetuating the system as it
Mm-hmm.
exists because, like, it really harms and almost kills some of us. And so, yes, I do think that that is why and I love, like, you articulated so much better than I ever could. This is why you're in academics and I'm just like running like a vibes, machine. But it is like I have exactly felt that, which is where I feel the institution protecting itself. I feel it when
Mm-hmm.
a person who is still firmly entrenched in the institution, if I share my personal account, which like I take honesty and like truth telling very seriously. Like if I share a genuine personal account and they rear up like very offended by it, that's the I see a self-protective mechanism occurring.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you weren't there. You aren't even part of it, but that's how much there's this like I will die on this hill because of really like what you're describing, where I viewed it always as like their identity is kind of intertwined with the
Mm-hmm.
system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's part of it too. You know, you become, especially when you're talking about people who are like in leadership positions. Of course, they've invested in that organization, in that institution, and part of their identity is, you know, being in a leadership position at that place. And so, any kind of criticism of that place, they feel a little bit more personally than you might if you didn't have that kind of leadership role and you're just, you know, kind of like an individual contributor, as they say.
Mm,
Um, and I think,
hmm
you know, I just want to highlight something else that you said earlier about people when you talk to older people or your mentors and they say, "Oh, I didn't know this stuff was still going on." You know, I hear that all the time. So I give talks about various types of challenges that women in particular, usually that's what I'm asked to talk about. Sometimes I get asked to talk about other marginalized groups, but often it's about
hmm
women and things like, you know, microaggressions and implicit bias and sexual harassment. And I'll describe things that have happened to me, or I'll describe things that we've written about in our research articles or that other people have written about. And inevitably, there will be older women in the audience who either speak up during the Q&A, or they come up to me afterward and say exactly what you described. Like, I didn't know we would still be dealing with this 20 years later, 30 years later. Why is nothing changing? So that's a very common observation.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a person who is like riddled with faults, but that is not one of them. Like when if medicine is not better in 10 or 20 years, I can at least be like I kind of fought tooth and nail to try and make it better. Um
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I'm not, but I just to be clear, I'm not blaming any of these people. They are very well intentioned. I'm sure many of them actually have tried to do what they could in their sphere of influence, and they're just upset that whatever efforts have been made by them and other people have yielded so little progress
totally,
over time.
totally. I do think that from a sphere of influence standpoint, this is why like we made the barstool sports of medicine. Like that's what the Hippocratic Collective is, and that's like how I pitch this project. And it literally is an ecosystem that's already over 20 physicians who like have a lot of influence. We're not medfluencers or anything, but in terms
Hmm.
of really articulate, compelling, diverse personalities who have that credibility, like the street cred, and we have lived it, that I think in this time, in this era, it at least has a shot at doing more than what the old school pre-internet people trying to be effective within their sphere of influence. You know,
Hmm.
that those would be limited resources. And we're just trying to like break the wheel.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And I think it's so important to share examples of like other ways to move through this career and to navigate this life that aren't just, you know, get paid by some hospital system to allow your own exploitation. So we need more examples of that, and we need to have more discussions about how we assert ourselves in our careers instead of, you know, following some path that has been predestined or pre-designed, preset, if you will, for us.
Yeah, and I'm such a big believer in like creating the dream job. I don't think that the dream job ever like existed for me. I don't think that I missed out on like going for it because um you know, I think I see a lot of that in you. I don't know any one traditional job that would be big enough to fit you. And I mean that
Mm.
obviously is like the highest compliment. I like there are some areas of friction that come with that, but like some of us were just not meant for like the prescribed jobs. And I do think
Hmm.
that a lot of the times when people have really innovated, it's because they dared to carve it out themselves.
Yeah. And you have to, I mean, it's not easy, and it's, I mean, I don't know about your people around you, but like I have gotten a lot of pushback and criticism, and a lot of people not understanding, because what do you mean you're not going to be operating every day? What do you mean you're not going to make the salary that a surgeon makes? What was the point?
One of my favorite quotes is, the more you love your decisions, the less you need others to love them. And I'm lucky to have a pretty small circle who like see me and are supportive, I would say in general. What in terms of, do I get like hate mail and ENTs and surgeons of all kind, but definitely even ENTs send me messages every day privately that are like, you're an affront to the profession.
Wow.
They
Oh,
are
you know
not
what?
from my little circle.
My favorite is the people who say, like, oh, you took a spot from someone else who wanted to.
That's literally the bane of my existence. And it's like, man, if you were any better, you could have had that spot. Like it's never a person who like had what it takes to go there. So I don't mess with that at all. Um
But
yeah.
also, like, the idea that, here's my feeling on those comments is, it is actually on the profession to keep us. We are smart, talented people who gave everything to gain these skills and to be able to help people in this very specific way. And despite everything we put in, everything we invested, everything we sacrificed, the way we were treated was so appalling that we walked away. That is not on us, in my opinion. And I mean, to some small degree, right? Like, nothing is all or nothing. Um, but if the work environment weren't so toxic, if we weren't being exploited, if we weren't being treated so horribly, at least I can speak for myself, I would still be operating, a lot. But that wasn't the reality that I experienced. And so I'm supposed to continue to put myself in a harmful situation so that Joe Schmo on the internet doesn't criticize me for taking up somebody's spot. Like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. It's extremely well said. I fully echo that sentiment because people always say, if you had a better, 5 years of residency, would you stay? And honestly, I do think would have stayed longer than I did. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, I'm able to just, I feel like I'm definitely in my reframing era. I'm in my silver
Mm-hmm.
linings era. And the silver lining is, it was so awful that I got out relatively fast. Sounds
Yeah.
good, man. I mean, it's just, um, there's a famous, beautiful quote about like, everything I've ever lost has my claw marks on it. And
Mm.
I really like in my relationship to medicine, to being a surgeon, to a toxic relationship. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is the vibe. I'm not saying that like I never loved it. I'm not saying that if
Mm-hmm.
the circumstances were different, I would have stayed with it more years and it could have
Mm-hmm.
killed me faster. Sure, sounds good. But I mean, I'm grateful that it's over. And I completely agree with you in the sense that like, how can any of us in good conscience recommend this career path to like really promising young women, promising young people, when there are other professions for really like bright minds that don't treat them as poorly
Yeah. Oh, I
or
don't.
don't accept across the board as such, like such unprofessional behavior.
Yeah. No, I definitely don't recommend it. And it's so hard because, on the one hand, I mean, we're all going to age. If we live long enough, we're all going to get sick. We're all going to need really good doctors to take care of us. And from that perspective, I would love to encourage all the smart people I know to go into medicine, right?
Yep.
But from a humanitarian perspective, I personally cannot justify doing that. Even more broadly, I don't think it's just a surgery issue. I think it's the entirety of the practice of medicine and the way we train people in medicine. I'm sure it's better at some places, worse at other places, but even in the professional practice of medicine and the way that we as physicians have not negotiated, have not unionized, have
Mm-hmm.
not advocated for
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, it is really not worth it, I think, in many ways, for most people. And so I really have a hard time reconciling those two truths. And so usually when young people come to me and they want advice on like how to get into medical school or can I support them or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I usually start with, here are some reasons to not go to medical school. Here are some other pathways to consider. And if they still, remain fixed in that idea, then I try to
Steadfast.
support them. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
steadfast is a good word. But yeah, I think it's really
Wow.
hard in good conscience to recommend a career path that is that brings a lot of harm with it.
Wow. Well, I could talk to you all day. I truly look forward to continuing this conversation because, like, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I believe that your words will resonate with many. Um, there are people who make space for others just by telling the truth, and I really do think that you are one of those people. So thank you again for being here today and really doing what you do professionally.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at FrancisMayMD. Check out our website, hippocratic-collective.com, for more shows and content like this. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. And remember, the more that we tell our stories and our truths, the more that we can meaningfully move the needle culturally in medicine and surgery. Okay, great. We did it. What a weird outro. I'm trying my best. It's late in the day.